Good evening, everyone. We would be shortly commencing our senior and intermediate fellowship webinar. This is a launch webinar that India Alliance conducts every year once the competitions are launched. And our current competition has been launched on 1st of March 2023. And the application deadline, as you can see on the screen, is 3rd of April 2023, 12 PM IST. Abdul, can you go to the next slide, please? Abdul, can you just click on all the pointers? Thank you. So before we begin, as you know, this is a GoToWebinar platform. I would like all of you to inform that this webinar is being recorded. Video and microphone of the attendees will remain switched off during the event. You can leave questions for the speaker as the speakers speak during the webinar in the question box. During the question and answer session, which will be at the end of the webinar, please raise your virtual hand to ask questions. We will unmute you and let you ask your question. In case the webinar ends abruptly on your end or there is a technical glitch, please join back using the same registration link that you have received in your emails. With these housekeeping rules, I would proceed further. Abdul, can you please go to the next slide? So this is today's agenda. We'll begin by introduction. So I will like to introduce myself. I am Dr. Arithri Datta. I work as a grants advisor with India Alliance. We will then have the Senior Intermediate Fellowship, Information and the Application Process, which will be led by Dr. Shomukanti Ghosh, who is also a grants advisor in India Alliance. This will be followed by a session taken by Dr. Tina Mukherjee, who is our Senior Fellow from INSTEM. We will have the next session by Dr. Arun Kumar Dhyalan, who is our Intermediate Fellow from Pondicherry University. At the end, we will have Professor Baron Chanda, one of our committee member, letting you know what are the expectations of the selection committee. And at the end of the webinar, we will have our question and answer session. Abdul, next slide, please. So first, let me introduce the India Alliance team. As I said, my name is Dr. Arithri Datta. I am a grants advisor in India Alliance. I've been working in India Alliance for the last 2 years. I also manage the senior and intermediate competition as a competition secretary. I'm a PhD in immunology and infectious disease from West Bengal State University, Kolkata, and I did my postdoc at CCMB Hyderabad. The first session, as I told you, would be led by panelist Dr. Shomukanti Ghosh, who is also a grants advisor in India Alliance. Has been working in India Alliance for the last 1.5 years. He has a PhD degree in infection biology, computational biology, and from West Bengal University of Technology, Kolkata. He has been a Teach for India Fellow for a year. So with this, Abdul, if you would take us to the next slide. We will come to Dr. Tina Mukherjee once we have completed the session with Dr. Shomukanti Ghosh. Abdul, you may stop sharing, and Shomu, you can share your slides.
Is the slide visible?
Yes, the slides are visible.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the webinar for Senior and Intermediate Fellowship in Basic Biomedical Research, Round 2, 2023. I'm Shomukanti Ghosh. As Arithri already mentioned, I'm a grant advisor at DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance. I will introduce you to the salient features of Senior and Intermediate Fellowship, and will also inform you about certain critical dates which are to be remembered. Okay, so India Alliance touches 2 primary research areas through its fellowship schemes. First is basic biomedical research, which is under focus since the inception of India Alliance. And second is clinical research and public health research, which got introduced in the year 2013. There are 3 types of fellowships under each scheme. For launching of the post-PhD career of a researcher, we have early career fellowship. For researchers who want to establish themselves as an independent research in their respective field in India, we have intermediate fellowships. And those who are well-established researchers who have made their mark in their respective area of research and are looking forward to lead or leadership ability to lead in their research area in the future, for them we have senior fellowship. Okay, now what India Alliance Fellowships, what makes actually India Alliance Fellowships one of the most coveted fellowship in India are its salient features. All our fellowships come along with flexible and generous funding, and we give due regard to non-research career breaks. And eligibility is always calculated only considering the post-PhD active research experience. That means non-research career breaks do not get included in their active research. We actually exclude it, and then we look for the active post-PhD active research experience. Applicants are not required to have a salaried. One of the very important feature is an applicant need not have to have a salaried position at the host institute or any commitment for the same from the host institute. None of our fellowships have age or nationality restrictions. Researchers with any nationality can apply provided their place of work during this fellowship should be India. Therefore, our emphasis is on establishing a researcher as an independent research and lead investigator, and therefore the entire emphasis of this fellowship is on the lead investigator. We encourage interdisciplinary research, and therefore our fellowships promote national and international collaborations with experts across the globe. At the application round, applicants are provided with continued feedback and support. The applications, which basically the full applications, once you're selected from the preliminary round to the full application, and once you submit your full application, it gets reviewed by international peer review, and the whole process of application is carried out in an online, secure, and user-friendly process or system, that is ISF. We call applications for senior and intermediate fellowship under basic biomedical scheme twice a year, and today we are here for round 2 of fellowship of the year 2023. So an applicant, for eligibility criteria, an applicant have to have 4 years to 15 years, should be within the 4 years to 15 years of post PhD experience. PhD can be in any discipline of science. The purpose, the proposal which you submit should abide by the remit of India Alliance research area, that is biomedical science. So it has to have relevance to human and animal welfare. And one of the most important criteria is that the host institute of your choice should be a not-for-profit institution in India. Now, for both intermediate and senior fellowship, it is a 5-year duration fellowship scheme. Both the fellowship both the applicants applying for both the fellowships can apply for major equipments. For applicants who are applying for intermediate fellowship are only allowed 2 support staffs, to request for 2 support staffs, which can be from technical assistant to postdocs. For senior fellowship, applicant can apply or request for maximum of 4 support staffs, which also includes from technician till postdocs. One of the key provision which intermediate fellowship provides to its applicant, that is work outside host institute up to a period of 12 months. You can apply for 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months, but the maximum is 12 months. So during the work outside host institute, per month subsistence allowance will be provided of $3,000 per month, and overseas travel for the work outside host institution purpose will be provided of sum of 1.5 lakhs. For the senior fellowship, work outside host institution provision is not being provided. For intermediate fellowship, an applicant will have to commit 80%, at least 80% of his or her research time, whereas in the case of senior fellowship, an applicant can commit for at least 70% of their research time. Now, the fellowship application cycle is broadly divided into two parts. One is preliminary application round and full application round, and both combined together takes nearly around 10 months time period. So this entire cycle of application round, that is round 2 2023, will take around time of 10 months. So first step is the cycle. In the cycle is preliminary application, where first round of screening is done to invite most competitive applicants from the cohort to submit a full application. At this stage, the invitees are also reminded of the resubmission policy of India Alliance, where an application, if gets rejected at the shortlisting stage, will not be able to apply for similar scheme or any junior scheme. The full application then undergoes rigorous international peer review and further reviewed by the selection committee, and based on which few of them get shortlisted to interview round. Now, those applications which, as previously mentioned, those applications which do not get shortlisted to the interview round, those applicants cannot apply for the same fellowship scheme or any junior fellowship scheme here on further. At this stage, and so the awardee will have, so at this stage, and once interview round comes, at this stage, an applicant is informed about the dual fellowship policy of India Alliance, where if awarded following interview, an India Alliance fellowship awardee cannot hold other fellowship for the project duration of 5 years. The awardee will have to relinquish any other fellowship held or awarded to them by this, but this policy does not apply on grant. The whole application cycle takes approximate period of 10 months to complete. Now, during the preliminary application, there are few mandatory rules which are essential to be mentioned, such as lead applicant details are mandatory. At least one letter of recommendation from a supervisor, that is PhD supervisor or your postdoc supervisor or any collaborator, is essential at preliminary stage. Sponsor details are mandatory, although letter of support from the sponsor at this stage is not mandatory. The role of mentor is not mandatory at the preliminary application round. In the full application round, along with previously mentioned roles at preliminary stage, letter of recommendation from sponsor is mandatory. The role of mentor and the letter of support is mandatory. For in the case of senior applicants, the mentor letter is not needed. It is only mandatory in the case of intermediate applicant. External sponsor for work outside host institute if applied. So if the intermediate applicant is applying for work outside host institute, in that case, the letter of recommendation from external sponsor is mandatory here. And as usual, as obvious, that it is not mandatory for senior applicant because there is no provision for work outside host institute. And if you are collaborating for any biological sample or any other purpose, any other collaborator you would like to have in your applications, their letter of support is mandatory. Now, preliminary application comprises of following critical sections which need to be filled. One is applicant CV. It is highly advisable to fill the applicant CV completely from pre-PhD to the recent details. When I'm talking about pre-PhD, I'm basically emphasizing from bachelor's onwards, so bachelor's, master's, PhD, and henceforward. Prospective applicants are also requested to fill their complete publication details in the format prescribed by the India Alliance. Next, summary of the proposed research. The prospective applicants are requested to keep their proposal summary within 750 words limit. It is a good idea to mention the problem applicant is targeting, approach to solve the problem, objectives, methods to be used, and expected outcome. Other than them, the detail of host institution, detail of sponsor, at least one letter of recommendation is mandatory in the preliminary application. Other than the above mentioned mandatory details, the full application requires other crucial details. A full research proposal. The word limit for intermediate fellowship is around 3,500 words, and for senior fellowship it is around 5,000 words. Budget and elaborate information on support staff, material, consumable, equipments, animal related details, access charges, others will be requested. It is advisable to be very careful while filling them and keeping the total budget within the cap value prescribed under each fellowship schemes. And also be reminded that during full application, there will be a part called justification under each of these sections. That justification need to be filled completely and in a very proper manner so that it gives clarity to the grant advisors. Along with these details, letter of support from mentor in the case of intermediate, letter of support from external sponsor if you are applying for work outside host institute, letter of support from collaborator if you are having collaborators, and details of your human and animal experiments. So all these informations are required. Now, most important timeline, that is the preliminary application is already open from 1st March 2023 onwards. The deadline, the last date to submit the preliminary application is 3rd April 2023, 2 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Full application submission deadline would be tentatively around June end 2023. An email, if your program application gets selected, then an email will go to you with all the details, and that would be the day of your start of full application. Interview would be tentatively around in the month of November 2023, and if awarded, then the fellowship start date would be around 1st March 2023. How you are going to apply to the ISS? You will go to ISS, you will create your own portal. Once you create your own account, you will find my applications, my research output, manage my details. Kindly make sure you click on the manage my details and provide all your information starting from your bachelor's, master's, PhD, and if at all you have any job experience in a company, all informations need to be put there. That information will get mapped into the application. Therefore, it is very much important to fill all the details here. Now, once you go for the application, you will find on your left-hand side, introduction, project summary, host institute details, like this. All sections will be available. Click into each of these sections and fill them properly, as much as detailed as possible. So the deadline to submit the preliminary application is 3rd April 2023, 2 p.m. Indian Standard Time. We are looking forward to your applications. Thank you.
Thank you. So hopefully you, all of you who are attending this webinar now have a clear idea of the application process. What are the mandatory rules at this stage in the preliminary application? And we would urge you to complete your applications as soon as possible and not wait till the last day, because as is the case everywhere, the servers get overloaded and there are sometimes technical glitch that are beyond even our control. So please submit your application as soon as you are ready with it. Next on our panel is Dr. Tina Mukherjee. She's an associate investigator at the Institute for Stem Cell Science and Regenerative Medicine in STEM, Bangalore. She's a PhD in developmental biology from the Max Planck Institute for Biophysical Chemistry, Germany. She was a postdoctoral fellow at the laboratory of Dr. Utpal Banerjee at UCLA. Her laboratory at INSTEM focuses on investigating metabolic requirements for the development of blood cells and exploring non-immune functions of immune cells in homeostasis and physiology. Tina Mukherjee is also our senior fellow, and we welcome her to take this session forward.
So, good evening, everyone. Yeah, thank you for inviting me to this panel. And I am supposed to cover the topic of why India Alliance. The first thing I will say that comes to my mind is why not. and especially because I have not ever had an India Alliance Fellowship in the past, neither the intermediate nor an early career. So this was a straight jump into, and I really wanted to be able to pull off the India Alliance Fellowship, and precisely for very specific reasons, which is on today's date absolutely essential for researchers like me to consider. Number one, funding. This amount of generous funding is not possible. I mean, you as a single-handedly, you're pulling off a 3.5 to a 4.5 crore grant is a lot of money. And to be able to pull off your ideas, if you have funds that limit your ideas, then this is one thing that India Alliance facilitates. So if you have a thing that you want to do and you really need either building up of an infrastructure, say buying a huge top end of the microscope, or technology, doing single cells and anything under the planet, I think the funding is a key issue, and this covers that rather generously. Secondly, the second point in my mind is the flexibility. I must say I have not used the funds yet, but I'm in anticipation. I'm hoping the money arrives, but in anticipation. But so the flexibility of the funding is something that is very attractive. Unlike in the past, when I've written all the DBT, DST grants, they're fenced. So you can only use consumable money for consumable and manpower money for manpower. So they're fenced. This is not the case here. You have some fenced money, but that is for the planned funds. I mean, that is mostly for manpower and or perhaps what you call I'm forgetting the term, but mostly the funds are flexible, so you can buy even if you have given a budget for consumables, but you need more money for doing something different, so maybe hiring another person. So there's a flexibility that allows you to move money here and there, and I think India Alliance facilitates or supports that kind of flexibility, because often we just spend money nonsensically buying things because that's where we have consumable money left. But if we rather would like to probably use the mass spec facility or do a single cell and go to another or hire a personnel, these funds are rather flexible, and I think that is a really added plus to the system, because these are the limitations I faced when I was constantly juggling between different grants and trying to make best use of the funds, and I realized that this was a big limitation. We end up doing a lot of buying that is not necessary, and then you waste it. So there's a lot of wastage, and I think the fact that travel. I mean, I haven't asked, so that we don't really now get a lot of travel money. So one thing that we are often limited with is also travel, and there is a component of travel that you can ask for, or collaborations, and this amount of money that you can facilitate these kind of engagements. Of course, I want to send my student to another lab or another place in the US or in some international laboratory, and I think India Alliance will facilitate that kind of engagement. Should you actually propose it in your grant well in advance, it allows you to be able to carry out such engagements, and I think these are possibilities that are not available in the normal DBT or DST grants, which become very essential. I mean, like if I want to send a student to do a mass spec at Purdue because we have a collaboration the University of Purdue, I can actually use the India Alliance funds to support my student to be able to go and travel there and be able to fund herself and the science and be able to conduct it. So the limitations that we face on a day-to-day basis from the normal grants, India Alliance allows you to breathe and be able to conduct it with more ease. And I don't know, so yeah, I say all of this in anticipation, but I'm also hoping I'm hoping that it'll be actually fun working with the India Alliance staff, because just that the level of engagement that I've had and the support that they are constantly there and they work with you, it makes it much more easier, because often you are stuck with a DBT grants officer or a DST grants officer and you don't know what correspondence to whom do you make a correspondence to. That level of that's another major difference I find, that the India Alliance has staff who work with you, and at least you know whom to reach out to and connect with and coordinate or contact should you have questions, should you have any doubts. You have somebody whom you can reach out to, rather than finding it being, I mean normally a DBT or a DST grant you write, you don't know whom to reach out to, and even if you do, you don't know if you're going to get a response. So these are certain points that I feel are really important. Suppose you're waiting for the next grant release, whom do you ask? I mean, you write to DBT, you never get a response. Although India Alliance is funded by now majorly by the DBT, but at least I find that the India Alliance staff is responsive, and ultimately the funds will come from DBT or wherever they come from. But at least you know that there's somebody whom you can reach out to, and they give you a response that you're working on it, and it helps. It helps as a researcher, because you're also trying to plan for your project, plan the starting of your recruitments, plan the buying of your equipment or anything. It helps because you're in correspondence with the staff there. Yeah, so I don't know if there is any other grant in India. The problem I see is that once your India Alliance fellowship is done, what is an equivalent of this? I don't know. So this is perhaps the best possible option that we have currently to conduct the kind of science that you would like to do, and there is no reason for you not being able to do it. Funding is not a limitation. Flexibility of utilizing the fund is not a limitation. And hopefully, compared to the other grant schemes of DBT or DST, this will perhaps be more streamlined in its operations. It has been streamlined in its operations thus far, and I hope it will continue to be so. So I guess the normal complaints that we have from the other funding agencies are not going to be seen here. So it really it should in my mind facilitate the kind of research that you've been thinking of, and without any shortcomings, without any hindrances. And if there are, perhaps you can work it out, and you'll be able to. So if there are any bottlenecks, hopefully they will be solved, and you can actually facilitate processes that will help you address what you want to do. So science to be able to conduct cutting edge science without any restrictions, and I think that's the fantastic part about this fellowship, and I really look forward to this opportunity as soon as the funds arrive. Yeah, so I think that's about it from my end, Aritri.
Okay. Thank you, Tina. That was really, really insightful, the journey that you shared with us, and really glad that you do think that India Alliance staff, we are responsible enough to get back to you. And yes, that is one of the USPs that we have a flexible funding alliance here, because if you have some transferable funds and you don't really need to buy an instrument that you probably had asked for when you wanted to during your application process, but you want to really transfer it to something else, maybe for your or you're accessing another instrument, and you have that flexibility to do that. We are not fixated on the headings under the transferable, at least. So
Correct.
yes, yeah. So thank you, Dina. We will of course take questions on your journey after the end of this session. We have a separate question and answer session. We will, for the time being, move on to our intermediate fellow, Dr. Arun Kumar Dhalan, who is an associate professor at Pondicherry University, India. He has done his PhD in biochemistry with special distinction from Jacobs University, Germany. He has been a recipient of the DVT Innovative Young Biotechnologist Award, UGC Research Award, and as I just introduced him to be our intermediate fellow, we are proud to have him as our intermediate fellow via the DVT Wellcome Trust Intermediate Grant. Over to you, Arun. You may take the audience through your journey.
Yeah. Thank you, Aritri, for the introduction. Good evening, one and all. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Is everything fine?
You are.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, just let me share my slide. Is my presentation visible?
Yes, Arun.
Is my presentation visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I am Arun Kumar Dhalan. I'm Arun Kumar Dhalan, recipient of Intermediate Fellowship Award, November 2021. Here I'm going to share my experience with my Intermediate Fellowship application and internship process. As you know that India Alliance application process consists of 3 stages. First, we need to submit a preliminary application, and if the preliminary application is successful, then you will be invited to submit the full-length application. And if your full-length application is suitable, you will be called for an interview. And I have submitted my preliminary application in March 2021, and the total main scientific content of the preliminary project proposal should be written within 750 words. That is very challenging for me. And in fact, for my proposal, I propose to identify a new readers of histone arginine modification and elucidate their epigenetic functions. And the India Alliance web portal also collects the details of your detailed CV, education, previous employments, publications, and details of ongoing and completed projects, as well as your scientific career up to date. And in addition, we need to provide the details of the host institute where the grant is going to be executed, and you have to provide the details of 2 experts who can write the good recommendation letters for you. And the details of mentor is optional in the preliminary application stage, but it is needed for the full application. And the decision of my preliminary application was informed to me within 6 months of applying to this, submitting my preliminary application to the India Alliance, and I was shortlisted for submitting a full-length application. And India Alliance provides a sufficient time, close to a month, to prepare and submit the full-length application. And the full project proposal needs to be written within 3,500 words, excluding the references. And I have detailed my full-length application and divided into various sections. For instance, I have divided this application into introduction and background information, motivation in the origin of the proposal, and aims of the project, work which has led to the project. Here I focused mainly on the preliminary data which supports the proposal, and experimental design and methods, and significance of the proposal, and the timeline and the cited references. Of course, with including necessary figures and flowcharts. You can have your own ways of doing this, and everyone has their own style of preparing their own proposals. Please go ahead with that. And during the full-length application stage, you can still update your CV. If you wish to update your CV, you can do that. And it is mandatory to provide the details of the mentors during the full-length applications. And details of the guidance which are expected from the mentor also need to be provided. For my case, I have requested my PhD supervisor, Professor Albert Elsch, to act as a a mentor for this intermediate application, and he graciously agreed for the same. And you can also add the details of the collaborators if you have, if any collaborators you plan to collaborate, and you have to provide the letter of support from your collaborator, and you have to upload at this full-length application stage. And you can also provide a lot of details of financial support which you are going to request from the India Alliance. Then the India Alliance provides the financial support for the personal support, staff support, and consumables, equipments, miscellaneous cost, and the travel, and all the expenditures are covered in the financial support section, and you have to provide the proper justification to claim this funds. And you also need to include the quotations for the equipments which cost more than 50 lakhs. Right, the decision of my full application was informed to me in 4 months' time, and I was shortlisted for an interview. In the interview, I was asked to present the entire proposal within 5 minutes of the time, very strictly. And after this very short presentation, the selection committee expert members asked various questions about different aspects of my proposal, and I tried to answer most of the questions to the best of my knowledge, I guess so. And the committee also asked a lot of questions which were raised by reviewers of my proposal, and the total time the interview lasted for about 31 hours. And the final decision of this interview and the selection process was announced within 10 days of the interview. And I feel the overall, this entire application and interview process is well organized, well structured, and timeline. And the application web portal is even very well designed, very user friendly. And indeed, it was a very pleasant and rewarding experience for me to do this application and getting this funding. And I was very delighted. And I wish you all the best. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, have something you want to interact,
I think this is a good time. Tina, if you could just kindly turn on your video camera as well. So I think as we wait for our committee member, we may just take some questions from the audience, and maybe just have a discussion, because both of you have taken to different tracks to this application. As the audience would know, that there are 2 tracks. We have the senior fellowship as well as the intermediate fellowship together for this application round, and the entire track is kind of different, but however, we do have the interviews together. The panel on the interview is same, and it's tough for both the track. So maybe we don't see questions, but if there are any questions in the audience, or maybe both of you can just continue share some other things. I mean, Arun, you may just say that, as Tina has put out, that what was it that led you to apply for this application? I mean, why did you choose our India Alliance Fellowship?
The point is, to do a good cutting edge research, you need a good funding, right? So majority of the funding agencies like DBT, SIR, we try to apply, and our grant is restricted to 50 to 60 lakhs, and in which we give some money for manpower, and finally you will get consumables only for 5 to 10 lakhs per annum, which is very, very insufficient if you really would like to do a good research. For instance, if you see, the antibody cost has gone so high, almost 60,000, 50,000 rupees upcoming antibodies are costing, right? So if I have funding of only 5 to 10 lakhs per annum, how do I support? And we need for each project, for each publication, we need a dozen of them, more than dozens. And it's very, very difficult to do a good cutting edge research with low funding. Okay, so even though we have a good ideas, what drives the good researchers, one of the key factors is funding. So if you have a good funding, you can think big, you can think wide. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult. It actually, the funding narrows down your research and your focus. So that's the reason I was trying to get this funding. But initially, when I joined Pondicherry University, the situation was, I want to have a good lab and stuff like this. So slowly things were built up, and started publishing in good journals. Then I got the confidence to apply this grant application, and it was successful. Thank you.
So what we did here from Arun was like trying to build up a lab from a little bit of a scratch, because of course, as a university, we do see in India that funds are a little streamlined towards the institutes, and universities do get a little less attention when it comes to funds. Tina, but your lab was already established. I mean, when you had applied to us, you had already had a number of our grants that helped you establish your lab. So right now, from a person as a senior person in research, where you already had an established lab, can you just take us through some of your thought processes that now that you have such a good funding, how is it going to really be an inflection point maybe for your lab, for your students in the lab?
Yeah, no, I know. So everything that I did so far was through these normal DBT, DST grants, and a bit of internet, maybe a bit of these SIF and some of the international grants, but not like a huge amount of money. What I ended up doing, I was writing like multiple grants and writing multiple reports. The work doesn't change. Now I have one grant on which I can focus. I'm not writing 10 grants to get money. Even if I write 10 grants, I will not get this amount of money. Right? I didn't have it in my past 7 years. So unlike all the, I was very happy that I never had an India Alliance intermediate because I wasn't spoiled. sorry, Arun. I will say because I built my lab from the petty funds, and I did what I did from those petty funds, going through all the petty problems. Now I want to sit back and enjoy science and relax, not worry about writing 10,000 different reports, chasing 10,000 different agencies and their scientific grants officers and trying to get ये मेरा release कब होगा, sir कब release होगा. And so the problem is that the grant, one of my grant was sanctioned in 2019. The money came in 2022. So how do you even do anything? And then you have to report that you come up with immediately, right? So having gone through that kind of, but still science has been done. That it's possible to do science still is what I will say. But now I think I want to breathe and do science. I'm looking forward to the time when money will come on time and I can plan my experiments and proceed with what I've planned. Not that makeshift arrangement. Okay, now I have to do this because this I can't do. I can't buy the equipment, or they didn't release this amount of money, or they've cut my manpower funds, or they've cut my consumable money. So I'm always reorganizing my plans, right? So now hopefully the time is to do science and to be able to enjoy what you have proposed and to be able to see what you proposed in full shape and form, evolve and emerge. And if the science is of the quality, it can reach the quality. So there is no compromise on what you want to do, be it with manpower, consumables, equipment, anything. And I think one of the major limitations I feel is being able to send students for these kind of seminars or meetings. And this travel component that I have, I think it's very important because travel is not cheap. Unfortunately, in India, we don't have meetings. How do I expect my students to do cutting edge science when they're not even exposed to what is happening in the cutting edge area, right? They need to go visit conferences, see what the speakers are talking about, see the students there. If I'm telling my student you're in enriched space, but this is their exposure, right? So to be able to see what the real life exposure is, I need to be able to send my students and see and present their work in meetings and have the confidence, come back and say that, yeah, we're going to be able to pull it off. So all of these, science is a package, right? And I think all of these contribute tremendously to the confidence that we'll be able to pull it off. And funding lies at the very crux of it. Timely arrival of funds is very important rather than just having funds on paper. timely arrival of funds and being able to use it the way you want to use it. And this package is very important, and India Alliance gives that. Again, the disclaimer: I'm not an India Alliance user. I'm a new one, so I'm just waiting to enjoy my time. So I'm hoping to enjoy my time. I have colleagues who have been India Alliance intermediate fellows, and I've seen how they've been gallivanting with money and so doing science while I was running around with my petty grants. But now I want to enjoy the moment of doing real science. I mean, really, yeah, science thoughtfully. Yeah.
I hope we can keep the other side of the deal. We can release the funds on time. I would like to say something, because usually I've seen that people from universities, I mean, we had this, whenever we have done outreach programs and we have tried to promote our funding, we had gone to universities, to, let's say, underserved areas in this country. And sometimes we have to listen that India Alliance grants usually don't make it way to these universities. They're kind of restricted to the institutes. But you are one of the first awardee from Pondicherry University, and which is
Yes.
I think coming from you, it would be really motivating for the people who are listening to our webinar today, that why you shouldn't hold back applying from a university. I mean, what motivated you?
No. From the beginning, I was thinking to do a good research with a lot of funding. So initially, to be honest, I don't have the confidence to apply India Alliance, because you also have this policy that once if you apply and if it is rejected, you cannot apply again. So I was a little bit hesitant, and I was also focusing to build up the lab and to build up some, at least a minimum good publication from India. Then we start applying. This is one intention. And second thing is, we always struggle for the money, because we don't have, in-house grant or money, which any support from the institution we don't get. We get only support to conduct the practicals. So only we rely on extramural funding. So at a time, I can have maximum of 2 grants to be running, each worth of around 50 to 60 lakhs, in this range. So far my career, I handle only these 2 or 3 projects, as Dr. Tina told, this running multiple projects and somehow pooling all the money to do all the research, and it is lots and lots of clerical work, and each time we propose a purchase and other things, small money we have to divide, and so many things, so many difficulties to do this. And so I was very interested to get this huge funding, so that I can do my science to my level best. So that's the interest and that's the motivation, and it worked very well, and the whole process was very pleasurable, even application, and the interview was too good. And the most important thing is, we also get the feedback from the reviewers, and it is really helpful. Now I also changed some of the hypothesis what I had based on this comments. I'm going to modify this a little bit, and this is very helpful. And we get almost 4-page report from 4 different reviewers. That is good, because many other funding agencies, sometimes we apply the grant, if it is selected or rejected, we don't get any comments. We may get a few lines of comment, that's all. That's the general comments, other not this much specific. That is very important here. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, I mean, that was really insightful. So I think we do have Professor Baron Chanda. Professor Chanda, if you please kindly can turn on your camera. Yes. Hi, Baron. Good to see you. I cannot hear you. Maybe you need to unmute.
Okay, now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. You can share my, you can see my camera?
Yes, I can see you and I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Baron. I mean, I know this is very early for you. It was really kind of you to be a part of this webinar. So I will straight away jump to your session. So we have Professor Baron Chanda, who has been associated with the Senior and Intermediate Fellowship as a committee member for a longer time. In fact, longer than I had been associated with India Alliance. And so he's a professor of anesthesiology and has secondary appointments in the Department of Biochemistry and the Department of Neuroscience at Washington University School of Medicine. He has a PhD. He was a PhD at National Center for Biological Sciences in India, where he gained expertise in membrane protein biochemistry, fluorescence spectroscopy, and basic electrophysiology. He was a postdoctoral fellow at University of California, Los Angeles, with Dr. Francisco Bezzalina. Professor Chanda's long-term interest is to gain a comprehensive understanding of ion channel function in a physiological context. So I will hand it over to Professor Chanda, and he will take you what are the expectations from a committee member when you apply for this particular award. Dr. Chanda, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. I mean, I have been in this committee for the past, I've served in this committee for the past 3.5 years, I believe. I started in 2020. And so as I'm not sure how much was covered, but just very quickly, I believe all the basics of how the committee works was, there was an overview of that. But very quickly, what we do as a committee is we look at the grants when they're assigned. We read some of the reviews and then give our scores first. That happens offline. And then based on our scores, the grants get ranked, and then we take the top grants up in that pile for interview. It moves to the interview process. And then I think that is somewhat unique in a sense that I have never served in a studies section or a grants review panel where candidates are interviewed directly by the committee. But this interview is actually very helpful for us as well as for the applicants, I believe. And what we do during the interview process is we give the applicants 5 to 10 minutes for them to give a presentation, and then we ask them questions. And this is, I think, really helpful part. In my view, that really clarifies some of our questions, and for many applicants, because they come from backgrounds or their applications may not perfectly match with the expertise of the panel, it helps them chance to clarify some of the questions that the panel may have, both scientific as well as with respect to the feasibility. So how do we really make these decisions, or how do we rate the candidates? And typically, we used to rate the candidates, and I think that's how it changed last time. We would rate the candidates based on their, on two categories. One, based on their potential and the candidate's background and their record. And second, there would be another rating based on the science that was proposed in the application. And the last time when I served in this committee, we had kind of merged both of them. I'm not sure exactly how it will go in the future, but the idea is both of those actually influence our view of the application. And typically when we look at the application, we use that. What we find is that the prior track record is quite important to us. It tells us what your trajectory is, how you have developed as a candidate over the past before you have come to this stage. And then what we also do is then we try to evaluate the project. And the evaluation of the project is mainly based on how exciting the project is at the level, is it a cutting edge? Is it going to answer new questions? But as the other thing that is really important, and sometimes we find that candidates underestimate, is the feasibility of the project, right? You can propose a lot, but given the situation that most candidates who apply for these fellowships are in, I'm talking of the intermediate fellowships, are usually starting professors. And even in and with most of the time, what we find is that that these candidates would propose projects that are actually would be not necessarily feasible, that it would require maybe twice the amount of time than proposed or than they have proposed in the application. So that's something which is typically seen for intermediate candidates, or they're proposing techniques that they don't really have the resources or expertise that they will be able to succeed in using those techniques to answer the questions that they are interested in answering. So that's some of the weaknesses we see in the intermediate. It's somewhat easier to actually rank for us the senior fellowships, because for a person who is applying for senior fellowships, typically they would have had an intermediate fellowship and then they are coming back for senior fellowship. But even when they don't have intermediate fellowship, if they have a good publication record in India and doing if they have shown that they have developed an independent research program, then they have a good chance of getting a senior fellowship. Except senior fellowships are much more competitive in a sense. We don't have that many slots that we have for senior fellowships. So it ultimately depends on the science and how the relative merits of the of one proposal versus another, and that's always a discussion between the committee members. I think that's kind of my general take. I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions. I can't really think of exactly what additional things I should cover at this time. Is there anything else that I should cover?
I think you probably had covered everything that is essential for what probably a committee expects out from an application who had reached the interview stage. We do also have our committee members looking into shortlisting applications from a bunch of full applications that we receive. So, and then we take them to the interview stage. I think Professor Chanda, you have covered whatever she's for, and we can straight away jump into the questions and see if there are questions for. There is one question that says that are there any length specifications for the full proposal and any template is there? So from India Alliance, I would answer that, at least for a template. Yes, we do provide some outlines for a template. For an intermediate fellow, the total number of, there is a particular number of words, and for a senior fellow, there is also a particular number of words. You have to have it within that number of words. However, Professor Chanda can tell you that whether length specification of a project proposal matters when the committee looks into the project, or is it about how the project has been put through in the proposal?
No, it doesn't really matter. I don't think it matters. You don't have to fill in all the pages. I think it really you get your if you come to in front of the panel, you get 5 to 10 minutes. Most people take all of that time that they are assigned. I have never seen a situation when they finish earlier. I mean, at this level, most of you have a lot to say. So it never happens that we have excess time and somebody has finished what they have to say before the time. It's usually, and then there are questions. So no, it does not matter. Beyond, I mean, you have to, you cannot be longer than specified, of course, but whether it can be shortened, yes, sure.
Thank you. There is one question. We have a question which says that I wanted to ask if one is applying for this grant while trying to answer a basic biomedical question, but collaborating with hospitals, then what category would you recommend? We from India Alliance, when we had seen project proposals, we had sometimes seen that there might be some human aspects to your project proposal, and that is very much within the remit of the basic biomedical research question that you probably are asking. So if you feel that this is a part of the basic biomedical proposal, then you can, of course, apply. You may write to us, and we can just go through a brief summary of your proposal and get back to you with some feedback. Professor Chanda, is there anything specific that the committee thinks about when there is a human aspect, and whether that would be considered clinical or that would be considered basic biomedical science?
I think the main thing that would know that if the basic question is a basic biomedical question, you could, and if you have some studies that you want to add which involve human subjects, then of course the committee would be looking into making sure that you have the necessary clearance and the authorization, etc. And like any clinical trials, there might be the statistics, etc. might be important. We haven't had a situation where I'm trying to recall if there was any situation where there were clinical trials involved directly. I mean, people have taken the clinical data and used that to direct or use that information to frame their questions in the project, but I don't recall a situation like that. But this would be something that would involve, yeah, you should talk to reach out to India Alliance beforehand. And I guess it depends on the nature of the clinical study that you are proposing in this. If it just involves a collaboration where you are not proposing to carry out any clinical research, but it's just linked to an independent clinical study that's going on, I think that is not as much of a problem.
Thank you, Professor Chanda. So the next question that I can see is that someone is asking that for big equipment, is something around 1 crore okay for an intermediate fellowship? Would such a request be negatively evaluated in the context of the host institute's infrastructure for the proposed project? I will let Shomo answer that first because he took everyone through the application process, and then maybe next half of the question I'll ask Professor Chanda to answer.
Okay, so you can request for an equipment which is above 50 lakhs, but in that case, the applicant will have to provide a quotation as well as a proper justification why that instrument is essential for the project, and be informed that even the committee member, if gets selected or shortlisted for the interview, even the committee will look into it and look into the utilization and the justification provided for the requirement of that instrument. So in and all, it will be later on decided whether that instrument is very much required or not, and then henceforward, if the application has to be awarded, will be awarded.
So Professor Chanda, the next part of the question that this person is asking that, let's say the infrastructure in the host institute is good enough, but this person still wants this 1 crore instrument. Would that impact the committee's evaluation of the project if there is justification and all provided? Because in our application form, we do ask for justification for instruments that are being asked to be purchased via this project.
Yeah, no, I don't think that really matters. I think we mostly first look at the science. And if we are excited about the science, I don't think it should impact your application. So yeah, no, that is really, I mean, we might later on talk about it. And if you have good justification, then as far as the committee is concerned, we don't put the cost before actually the project. So we look at the science in the project, and then that is our priority when we evaluate a project, application.
Okay, so the next question is, maybe I'll answer this, that yes, this question is that do we have to be situated in India or have an academic position in India before applying for the intermediate fellowship? To answer the first of the question, yes, it's a mandate of the India Alliance Fellowship that the host institute should be situated in India, and if you are a recipient of this fellowship, you will have to be present in India to activate this fellowship. On the second part of the question, no, you do not need to have any permanent academic position in India while you're applying for the intermediate fellowship. But we have, I mean, it probably would be good motivation for all of you that we have seen a number of our intermediate fellowship awardees have gone on to have permanent position in the respective host institutes. So there is a question. So this, maybe Professor Chanda, you can take this. My question is regarding the project goal, whether it should be a general LAC theme-based project or a very specific project.
I think you would want to have clear aims of that project. It could be a general overarching, there can be an overarching hypothesis. There's a general goal and there's an overarching hypothesis, but there should be 2 or 3 what we call in the US specific aims of the project. So you need to explain, you need to write enough details so that somebody who looks at that project can evaluate whether it is feasible and scientifically structured in terms of both logic as well as in the time period that you're proposing to. So it should be written, it should have specifics essentially. It cannot be just all general proposal literature review kind of thing. It has to be a proposed research project. I'm not sure if this answers the question the person asked.
Yes, I think
it did answer the question.
More specific, but I think it answered whatever probably the person was looking for. Shuma, can you take the next set of questions? I think I've lost a little bit of a track.
Okay, so there is one question that I was working on a diagnostic device development for a company. Will it be counted as non-research break? So generally, we make sure that during the period when you're working in a company, if you have had any publication during that time, and in the process while developing the diagnostic device, whether it is an active research which you have been performing at that company, if that being the case, if you have publications, patents, and it is an active research, then we will consider it into post-PhD active research. So it will not be counted as a non-research career break. Okay.
I think there is a hand up, so we'll take an audio question then. Bridget Kumar, if you have a question, you may ask it. I have unmuted you.
Okay, let me check. Okay, so by when the letter of recommendation will have to be submitted during preliminary application. So please be informed that in ISS, once you select somebody for a role, for example, you have selected your supervisor to provide you a letter of recommendation. So until and unless that person accepts the role and uploads the letter of recommendation and submits it, ISIS will not allow you to submit the preliminary application. So it is advisable to talk to your supervisor or the person who is going to provide you the letter of recommendation to accept their role, go and prepare, make their own account on the same email address which you have used to invite them, then accept their role, upload their letter of recommendation, submit it, and then you can go ahead and submit the preliminary application. Please take your time and complete it as quick as possible so that you are free to submit your application whenever you feel like before that deadline period. Okay, next.
I will take this question, and I think this is basically Professor Chanda, you can answer this. Similar to the guidelines provided for the full application from the committee's perspective, any key aspects that would help get the initial application through? I think this person is asking whether through to the interview, and then from there an award.
Any key aspects that help with the application to succeed? I think really it is the science that really matters, and the track record. Those two things ultimately matter. And I think we weigh them both equally. Your prior track record is important, and that in a way, and it I think more than the track record, you have to think of the track record also in terms of the trajectory, that it doesn't, if it is, if you say published very well during your PhD, but since then you haven't published much, that's the trajectory that doesn't look great. It's not that we exclude based on it, but it wouldn't be viewed as well. But if it is inverted, right, your PhD publication, as you move to the next stage of your career, you're doing even better than the previous stage, then that looks like a good trajectory, right? That's kind of one of those things. So in terms of the track record, and I think the science is important. If science that excites most of the committee members, it appears cutting edge, and as I said, feasible. That's an important thing. You can propose things that might be feasible in a first world country, but given some of the challenges and things like that, you have to be also reasonable about what you can propose. So it has to be, it requires a little bit thinking and also talking to your local mentors about what is feasible and what is not feasible when you put together a project. I think that's an important feedback that most applicants will benefit from if they talk to their local mentors who are in that environment about the feasibility of the projects.
Thank you, Professor Chandra. Shomo, next set of questions.
Yeah, there is a question. I think Professor Chanda can give answer to that. What are the expectations regarding the elements of a research proposal? How much weight or balance is given to understanding basic mechanism than, say, to translational aspects?
I think we don't really divide any science into basic versus translational. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
I hear some sound, so.
Yes, I think there was a disturbance. I think it's gone
okay.
now.
It's gone. Okay, sorry. Well, but you know, the most of the committee members, we are basic science researchers. So I would say that our understanding or our innate preference is to look at the basic to look at this project and see what basic fundamental knowledge it is going to advance. But that does not mean that if you are developing or proposing to develop a new device that's going to, say, treat just for the sake of a new type of pacemaker or something like that, that might not require any replacement, for instance, then it might be still exciting enough, although I'm not sure whether it will fall in this grant mechanism. I don't know about the different grant mechanisms in the India Alliance. I just do this one. But I would say that most of us in the committee are basic researchers. Although we do some of us also do science that gets translated into either lead to development of diagnostics or clinical treatment or drugs, but fundamentally we are all basic researchers. So I would say that there is really, I don't believe that if you're asking a basic question, it is viewed negatively in any way.
Okay, on this note, maybe I can ask our current awardees. They have also submitted their proposals and they have got the award. So maybe Tina or Arun, you can also put your insights that what kind of a proposal, when you were submitting a proposal, what were your thought processes? How did you look? Because in India Alliance, we would like to have proposals that have a translational value, definitely. And about the fact that whether you have a lot of clinical aspects in your project or not, we do a preliminary screening before we send it out to our peer reviewers or to the committee members. And sometimes we do suggest someone to just change the track if let's say there's too much of a clinical aspect. We may just ask this person to apply for the clinical and public research fellowship that we have. So maybe Tina and Arun, you can also just give some snippets that when you decided on your projects and the proposals, what were that you thought? Now that we have the committee members' perspective, we may just have a perspective from our audience.
Okay, actually, my proposal is on epigenetic reader domains. It is a very basic fundamental proposal, and it do not have this. My proposal do not have any translational aspects for that matter. So I propose to investigate the proteins which could recognize various histone modifications and tries to understand the signaling pathways. And so that's all the proposal is all about, and it's trying to understand the enrichment of modifications in different scenarios and stuffs like this, and different cells and stuffs like this. But other than that, it do not have any translational component in this proposal. It is attached to that. So I don't think that it is having a basic proposing a basic research without translational aspect is not a negative in this India Alliance application and evaluation process is concerned. This is my feeling. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think the same is true for me. In fact, with all this translation and science that translates that's going on in the current scenario, this is one grant I feel where you can comfortably write a basic research grant and not worry about not having a translational aspect. I mean, this is how I wasn't even thinking about in that direction of putting a translation component. I have a very basic, I mean, I work on Drosophila. We use, I wasn't even under the pressure to think that I will translate the findings of my Drosophila into a higher model system. I do say that I will do it in collaboration, but that is because I want to explore it. But that's not a part of my grant that will be funded through the funds through India Alliance. No, There is nothing that in my grant I ask which has a translational component or proving that the fundamental principles that we find in Drosophila or whatever we are proposing will hold true in higher model systems. We're asking a very fundamental question where we want to know how immune cells control sensory perception of the animal. And we are using flies. We have some preliminary data where we find that immune cells and the metabolic state is controlling animal behavior in flies, and this is the axis that we want to explore, and we have an idea behind it. We propose the idea, we're going to test the idea, is what the grant allows me to do and has funded me to do. Yes, the grant has an in my grant I do say, should we see these ideas come through and we're able to, we would like to test them in higher model systems. But that's in a later, I mean, that's like a direction that the lab will take on board, but nothing that I felt pressurized to make it really human or mammalian centric. No, I feel this is one place where it values basic research, be it anything. So I really appreciate this fact about Indian lands.
Both of you. So we can move on to some last bit of questions, Shomo, if there are some unanswered questions.
Yeah, there are several questions actually. Okay, so is there any age or experience upper bound for intermediate fellowship? For example, 40 years of age or 7 years post PhD or 5 years post faculty position. So as I have already mentioned during the webinar, that the experience, the minimum experience which is required for applying to intermediate fellowship is 4 years post PhD active research experience and maximum till 15 years post PhD this active research experience. So irrespective of the matter what is your age at the moment, if your active research post PhD active research experience falls between 4 years to 15 years, you can apply for.
So I've come to a question where someone is asking that this person has done his PhD and MS from South Korea and now is a scientist in the CSIR lab. The question is if there is any geographical location to choose mentors, supervisors for intermediate application. So no, we do not impose that this mentor or the supervisor that you're choosing needs to be present in India. They can be from anywhere in the world, people you have done your postdocs with, people you have done your PhDs with, as long as the person can justify the role that you are going to play in your application. As a mentor, for a supervisor, it's basically, in our application, the supervisor is defined as a person who's giving you a recommendation letter. So yes, this person is important in your application, but may not have a direct connection with you while you are going through your application. But mentors are very important, so are collaborators. And why we are on this topic, Professor Chanda can just highlight how important is the role of collaborators, because many of the times we have seen during interviews that a particular project proposal is fantastic, but somehow down the line with lack of good collaborators that have really not made the cut and an award has not been given. So as a committee member, how important is this role according to you?
Yeah, I would say the collaborators' role becomes really important when you are proposing to go into an area where you don't have a previous track record in. So if you're trying to propose, for instance, doing NMR spectroscopy, but you have never done NMR or something like that, and your project requires you to do, we would definitely expect at least you are collaborating with somebody who is an expert in that field. So I think that's really where the collaborator comes into play, is to complement the areas in terms of the expertise. And we do look for a letter of support from collaborator, and their enthusiasm of the collaborator in collaborating with with you. You cannot just put anybody as a collaborator without having the letter of support from them. I don't think it would make sense. And I think that's really what you need a collaboration for, is to kind of, if you are going into a new area or adding new techniques, into bringing in new techniques that you will use to go into a new direction, that's really what we are looking for a collaborator for. There are many times many applicants have collaborations or keep their current postdoc mentor as their collaborator. Sometimes one has to be, and it's not viewed negatively or positively in any sense versus anybody else as a collaborator, but you do want to make sure that you are clear as how your research differs from what your postdoc mentor, for instance, has been proposing, so that it is essentially, we want our applicants to become independent or to develop an independent research program. That is, we want them to be recognized for their own achievements and not necessarily viewed as another form of extended postdoc, and you are basically collecting data and feeding it to what your postdoc mentors projects, etc. So that's not what the whole purpose of this application and this grants are. We want you to develop your own independent research program, and I hope that is clear, because that's really important for us, that this project is to develop the intermediate fellows and their research program or these funding mechanism. And so you have to be clear about what the role of the collaborator is, and the collaborator also in their letter should be clear about those aspects.
I think that pretty much answers the question. So Shomo, maybe we can wrap it up. I mean, it's already 6:30, and I can see a few questions about the duration of the fellowship. This is usually 5 years duration. How many gets awarded? Well, this is a tough competition, and 10% of the people who apply would actually get awarded. And if there are, Shomo, if there are, you just want to wrap it up, saying some last words.
Yeah, so there is one question which I would just take very quickly. If not having a postdoctoral fellowship, for example, EMBO or Marie Curie or any other, have it impacted on the success rate of the intermediate fellowship, provided having very good trajectory and publication record for the applicant? Well, having a postdoctoral fellowship does add to a career trajectory, but if the applicant's overall career trajectory, publications, and then performances have been really good, then I don't think the applicant need to worry about not having a proper postdoctoral fellowship. We will look into it's a holistic approach. We look into the career trajectory of an applicant. So with this, there are a lot of questions which are still to be answered. We will try our best to answer it here in the box.
No, so what we can do is, since we are really short of time right now, as you know that you can email to us. Abdul, if you can go to the slide with the, yes, you can see the email ID actually on the current slide, and you may email to us there with all your questions, and we'll do our best to get back to you within 3 working days and answer them. I hope this webinar has been fruitful for you, and we would be ready to receive a lot of applications. So Shomo, if you could just end the webinar, you can thank our panelists.
Yeah, I'd really like to thank Professor Bharanchanda for taking his time out in the early morning, such an early morning, and being such an active, committee member who has always been a supportive one for us. And I am very much sure all your comments, all your answers must have been really helpful for our prospective applicants to make their decisions very clear. I would like to thank Dr. Tina Mukherjee. Thank you for your insight in the entire process of your application and what is your thinking, how you exactly approached about India Alliance competition, why it came to your mind, and how you believe that it is going to be beneficial in your future research. Dr. Arun Kumar Dalyan, thank you. Thank you for your insight and your information. So all this, the slide exactly, it was very informative. It gave a lot of, I think it gave a lot of information to the prospective applicants already. And thank you, Dr. Aritri, for conducting it. You have been an excellent person who have taken care of the entire webinar so well. And last but not the least, we at India Alliance would prefer you all kindly send your queries to info@indiaalliance.org. So once you send your queries to that, we will try our best to respond to you within 3 to 5 working days. So
thank you all
Okay.
for being
Thank
part
you.
of this webinar. Bye. Have a
Bye-bye.
nice day.
thank you. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.